Good morning, members of the press and members of the community who are watching. Thank you for joining us this morning and for responding to the notice on such short terms this morning. I want to welcome everybody. My name is Sergeant Andrew Valenzuela. I'm the Public Information Officer for the University of Arizona. I'm welcoming to the podium today and those who will be speaking the U of A Chief Safety Officer, Mr. Steve Patterson, behind me to my left, accompanied by UAPD Chief of Police Christopher Olson, Tucson Police Chief Chad E. Kazmar, Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos. To my right are our UAPD detectives, Detective Nicole Nelson, Detective Todd Kaufman, and Detective John Guterslow. There will be time for our speakers to take questions from media at the end of their address, but please keep in mind we will try and keep this as brief as possible so that you all can go about your day. I now present to you Mr. Steve Patterson.
Thank you, Andrew. Again, I would like to welcome all of you being here. I would like to start by giving my condolences to the family and friends of Mr. Minhaj Jamshidi. When incidents like this tragic event of this Pima Community College student happen on our campus, the tragedy extends far beyond the individuals involved and affect our whole Wildcat community. I'm going to now turn this over to University of Arizona Police Chief Chris Olson to share more about the investigation and the arrest.
Thank you, Steve. I'd like to first and foremost extend my deepest condolences to the family and friends of Minhaj Jamshidi. I saw many of them that evening, even spoke to a cousin, and my heart breaks for them. Before I get to the investigation, I'd like to start by thanking quite a few people, beginning with the family and friends of Minhaj who tried to save his life. Thank you to the witnesses who stood by for hours to provide us statements, to the housing and residential staff members of the Arizona, Sonora, and Coronado residence halls for your incredible job in providing guidance and support to those students, to the Tucson Police Department led by Chief Kazmar for their quick response and continued support throughout the initial and ongoing stages of the investigation, specifically to members of the Community Resource Team. As always, the Pima County Sheriff's Department plays a central role to special operations and UAPD's ability to handle and mitigate a wide variety of things. We received tremendous support from Sheriff Nanos and from the Pima Regional SWAT. Thank you to the Tucson Fire Department for your life-saving efforts. Pima County Victim Witness was promptly on scene to provide victim advocacy support, as well as UAPD's K2 Solutions victim advocacy providers who spent the evening with Minhaj's family. And to my staff, the police dispatchers who took the countless phone calls and directed our officers, and to our police officers who secured the scene and attempted life-saving measures for almost 10 minutes. As indicated to my right are members of our Criminal Investigations Unit, Detective Todd Kaufman, Nicole Nelson, and John Guterslow, who we affectionately call Groot. They work tirelessly and with great determination. Their work is the foundation in which law enforcement was able to arrest the suspect. And while we are all relieved that the suspect has been apprehended, for these individuals, the real work begins. I'm reminded that we are still seeking information related to the suspect's whereabouts over the past couple of days, and we are asking for the community to bring forward any additional information or evidence. Before I go into the case overview, I'd be remiss if I don't thank our Interim Vice President of Student Affairs, Dr. Amanda Kraus, for her leadership and for her team in providing the needed support to our students in the aftermath of this shooting. So I'll go into a case overview. On September 22nd, UAPD and TPD received simultaneous 911 calls about a shooting that occurred at 10:59 p.m. on the volleyball courts, the sand volleyball courts located next to the Arizona Sonora Residence Hall. The victim was shot on the sand volleyball courts. The friends and family members picked up the victim and carried him to a vehicle parked on the south side of the Arizona Sonora Hall with the idea of transporting him to the hospital. Once at the vehicle, they changed their minds and waited for first responders. The first UAPD officer arrived in minutes and was followed by additional officers who provided CPR and other life-saving measures. Tucson police officers also arrived within minutes of the call to help secure the scene and locate witnesses. Both UAPD and TB attempted to locate the suspect. The investigation reveals that there were several fights that occurred before the shooting. The suspect was known as someone who regularly played volleyball at the courts, but no one knew his name. At about 8 a.m. that same morning or the next day, on that Monday, UAPD received a phone call from someone who identified the shooter as Ryan Romero-Encinas. UAPD received additional calls throughout the day, also identifying the shooter as the same. Detectives used that information to obtain residence and vehicle information. Coupled with other evidence, detectives applied for and were granted 2 search warrants and 1 arrest warrant. Members of the Tucson Police Department's community response team and the Sheriff's Pima Regional SWAT, in support and coordination of UAPD, served 2 search warrants on Tuesday. Being unable to locate the suspect at those locations, UAP contacted the U.S. Marshals Service and the Tucson FBI office for help on information sourcing and fugitive recovery. UAPD, with the full support of the Office of Public Safety and the University of Arizona Communications Department team, then issued a public bulletin asking our community for help. Yesterday, at 3:10 p.m., the suspect returned to his apartment to turn himself in. His roommates promptly called 911, and TPD and UAPD responded to arrest him. Encinas has been booked into the Pima County Jail, where he remains in custody with no bond. Before I take any questions, I'd like to provide an opportunity for Sheriff Nanos and Chad Kazmar to speak about the tremendous partnership and support that their departments provide both UAPD and the University of Arizona.
Good morning. I'm just here to show support for not just Chief Olson and his team, but for our community as well. These tragic events, these really senseless acts of violence, we see way too many of them. And we know, we recognize, I speak for all of our command in law enforcement throughout this community. We recognize that this is a tough job, that we face several challenges, but we know that together, collectively, collaboratively, we are a stronger force united. And so I do stand here in support of Chief Olson and his team. We've always supported each other. We continue that in our regional efforts. And I just want the community to know that I don't think there's one law enforcement leader throughout this valley that doesn't share my same sentiments when we say we're working together as hard as we can to keep our community safe, and we can't do it without you, the community, as well. So I appreciate all your efforts, those witnesses who stepped up and called and did what was the right thing that we know we're supposed to do, and I thank them as well. My heart prayers go to the family, and I'll now introduce Chief Kazmar from Tucson Police.
Thank you, Sheriff. I appreciate the media being here today to cover a senseless act of violence that's impacted our community. I hope that our community continues to be outraged and disappointed, and it drives conversations, frankly, at home, because that's where we're going to start to change some of these conversations. Why is there a gun present at a volleyball game with young men in their early 20s or younger than that? Let's ask ourselves that question. If we want to start getting down to the root cause of violence in this community and asking ourselves why young men continue to have firearms in places that they shouldn't, that's how we're going to continue to impact violent crime and gun crime in our community. The other challenge that I want to make to not just students at University of Arizona or Pima College or our broader community, but again, a conversation is, you've heard me all say this before, you have the ability to turn around and go the other way when there's conflict. You don't have to meet conflict with conflict. And our world has changed in post-COVID environment where tempers are shorter and more young men are producing firearms, and what used to be a verbal argument or what used to be a good old-fashioned fist fight now turns to gun violence, and it's unacceptable. And this can't just be a police problem to solve. It's got to be a community conversation that we have. And those conversations have to start early. This isn't a gun ownership conversation. This is a responsible gun ownership conversation. It's teaching our youth the proper place to carry, to secure, when to have a firearm, when not to have a firearm. But these conversations have to start within families, within social groups. I want to challenge the students. Ask your friends when you're going out on an evening, on a Friday or Saturday night, does anybody have a gun? Because if you do, you're not invited. We need to start asking those questions. To our family members, when you're having a loved one going over, even as young as middle school and junior high and high school, if your loved one's going to have a sleepover at a house, ask that question. Are there firearms in that house? Are they secured? Are they safe? We have to not be afraid to talk about such a polarizing conversation in this country, which is gun violence. It's not about gun ownership. It's about safe practices with these firearms, and continuing to be outraged when senseless acts like this happen. Because this could have happened anywhere in our community, and it happened to be impact University of Arizona this time. But as a chief of 250 square miles in this geographic area, I can tell you that gun violence does occur throughout our community at a rate that continues to be unacceptable in the 33rd largest city in this country. I can tell you that we have deployed all of the latest evidence-based strategies through the Public Safety Partnership. That is a program funded by the Department of Justice and the Bureau of Justice Assistance to make sure that we have all the tools and support that we need to impact and reduce gun violence as rapidly as possible in our community. But it's going to take the community helping. It's going to take the community being engaged at a personal level, influencing friends, influencing social media. We've certainly seen the ties. I'll make the correlation to the school threats that we've seen across our country the last 2 weeks. So as a country, as a state, as a community, we have to rally together. We have to continue to have conversations. And that is how we will continue to end senseless acts of violence and gun crime like we saw. I want to close with just highlighting the partnership. We couldn't do this alone. I commend the detectives who did amazing work to solve this case. I also want to celebrate the Operations Division West Community Response Team. Again, there's been structural changes at my organization to make sure that we have the plainclothes and undercover and violent crime resources so that when violent crime, obviously we want to prevent the violent crimes and acts from occurring, but when they do, that we can support and swiftly find the offenders who have committed these crimes in our community and hold them accountable. And that is the case, and that's what happened here with our Operations Division West Community Response Team. So I'm very grateful that we were able to safely apprehend this suspect in this case. So with that, I'm going to turn this back over to the chief, and also available for questions.
Okay, with that, we're willing to take any questions related to the investigation, understanding it is an active investigation, and we'll answer what we can. Craig?
It sounded like you were looking up to this a little bit. Craig Smith, KGUN TV. It sounded like you mentioned this a little bit in your opening comments. Are there some people in danger of prosecution for harboring this suspect before his arrest?
We can't answer that at this time.
J.D. Wallace with 13 News. Why a first-degree murder charge? It sounds like it was a fight. You know, can you explain maybe, are there any other charges also possible in this?
I can't talk about that either, but the investigation reveals that that's the proper charging at this time.
Can I go for one more? Can you just also say, did the suspect say why he turned himself in? And we also noticed his hair was different than the picture, so was he thinking of some other avenues?
Suspect provided us no information.
News 4 Tucson. Were you able to obtain the murder weapon?
We obtained a weapon, but we cannot confirm if it is the murder weapon at this time.
And do you have any information, do you have any belief that he had any past connections or relationship with the victim, or was this a first-time interaction?
Our investigations are early on, and the only information we have is that he was someone who frequented the volleyball courts in the past.
Hi there, Ellie Wolf,
Hi, Ellie.
Arizona News Star. I'm just wondering what support resources students living in that dorm?
Yeah, so through Dr. Amanda Kraus, we have stood up, and we stood up the very next day, or she stood up the very next day, our counseling and psychological services, and provided mobile locations for students to come to get resources. Our residents and housing staff, led by our community directors and our resident assistants, are also providing support. And we at UAPD also offer our K2 Solutions victim advocacy support to anyone affected by this.
Christopher Conover, AZPM, you said the first 911 calls came in, basically we'll call it 11 o'clock. First UA alert went out 10:30 or 11:30. Why the half-hour delay, especially when you're in a student housing area?
Yeah, no, that is a fair question. The systems that we placed for U alerts failed us in this instance. We were quickly overwhelmed, and us falling short on that is my responsibility, and I take full responsibility for that. I can assure the community that we've implemented changes to our U alert system immediately. We've conducted the training, and we will discuss more about the U alert, the process itself, with our community in the coming days, so they have a better understanding of how this works.
I know these are all young adults. Does this raise concerns, though, about having an open campus when we have apparently the suspect was someone who'd been showing up before, maybe being a problem before, a number of small fights? Is there some way of addressing having people that aren't in the university participating in events here like that?
You know, this is an open campus. I think it should be open to all community members that want to enjoy the University of Arizona. You asked that question about, having a weapon. While it is not against the law to possess a weapon on campus property, it is a violation of our student code of conduct and our rules. So we do the best that we can to ensure that people are not bringing weapons onto this campus.
This is slightly to the point brought up about the U alerts. It was also said to us by your office that dorms in the area were locked down, correct?
Yes, the dorms are always on lockdown. To enter any residence hall on campus 24 hours a day, 7 days a week requires CAT card access that is only given to those that live in there or are staff members of residential and housing members.
Well, we spoke with several students about this, and some told us that their dorm units were not locked down as this was all going on. Do you have any indication that there was a lapse in that communication as well?
I think we're talking semantics when we talk about a lockdown, right? A full lockdown is different in the sense that we weren't issuing a lockdown. Those dorms are always on lockdown, and students do have the ability to enter using their CAT card. But individuals who do not belong to that residence hall or are not members of the staff cannot enter. There's always concerns about tailgating in and people holding the doors for individuals, and those are things that I don't know that we're ever going to be able to stop. What we continue to do is educate our community that that's not okay, that you shouldn't be holding the doors for individuals that you're not sure if they belong into that residence hall or not. But those dorms were locked.
Got a couple from Zoom here. This is from Katia Mendoza with Arizona Public Media. What can the University of Arizona do moving forward to increase safety on campus facilities like the volleyball courts without completely closing them off to the public?
You know, I've said this many times. My philosophy is a high visibility enforcement model. When bad guys or people want to do harm or commit harm on this campus, the one thing that may change in their mind is a uniformed police officer driving in a police car, riding a bike, walking around, or driving in a golf cart. Our mission here at UAPD is to increase our high visibility presence. Now, we're limited with the resources we have, but that doesn't mean we don't do our best job. And the direction to the staff is that we are here to prevent crime and to stop victimization each and every day. And it is our mission, because I do not believe people should be victims of crime. Anyone who knows me, I'm intolerant to it. I take it very personally. And so our officers each and every day, they go out there with a high visibility model to prevent crime, but also to provide the other wide variety of services that we do. Engage our public, public assist, directions, whatever we can do. But when we talk about how do you protect a campus, you start with high visibility enforcement, but then you take a whole community approach. We have to get our community more involved, to reporting suspicious activity, to doing the things that Chief Kazmar said. Don't be part of the group that walks around with a gun. It's not okay.
And one clarifying question from Mary Drobnik at 12 News in Phoenix. She asks, for clarity, the suspect and victim were playing a volleyball game with others, which led to the small fights and ultimately the shooting?
That is correct.
Hi, Sophia Hammer with the Daily Wildcat. I know several parents and students were kind of upset that classes were scheduled the next day. I wanted to know what led to that decision to continue with classes the next day.
The decision to hold class or not hold classes are not my decision.
Was the suspect a student at the university, and once again, did he live at that 850 East Wetmore apartment that he gave himself up at?
The student is not affiliated with the University of Arizona, the shooter we're talking about, and yes, he did reside at the Wetmore apartment complex.
May I ask also, what other locations did you go to? You mentioned there were 2 search warrants. Can you get into any of the?
No, I can't talk about the other location at this time.
When you were talking about trying to maintain that presence, do you have the resources you need to maintain as much presence as you'd like, or do you have the potential to improve those resources?
I think I speak on behalf of every law enforcement leader everywhere. No, we don't, but we're working towards that.
Sir, with all due respect, you said it's not your decision whether or not to hold classes the following day, but you are the police chief. If you identified a security threat, could you not communicate with the appropriate person to make that decision?
Yeah, I didn't believe there was a security threat, but again, the decision to hold class or not is not my decision to make.
Whose decision is it?
Provost?
Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Maneri Ruiz with Univision Arizona. I spoke with the victims' co-workers days after the shooting, and they told me that days prior to that Sunday night game on Thursday, they had an altercation. Do you know anything about it, and did that lead to the shooting on Sunday night?
We are aware of prior altercations between these groups, but we have no information that suggests it led to the shooting.
One additional Zoom question from 12 News. Let me get out of the way of the speaker. Second question from Mary Drobnik at 12 News in Phoenix. The University of Arizona's Tucson campus is being accused of ranking as the #1 college in the country for gun violence towards students and faculty. Is that accurate, and what is your response?
That sourcing, that information is news to me, so I don't think I have a response for that.
Is there any element of ethnic discrimination here? Any sort of hate
No.
crime element to that?
No.
Okay.
Yep. Because he was an immigrant from Afghanistan, do you want to make any sort of statement just to the immigrant community about this?
And we've been in contact with the Muslim community.
You know, I'd be, just listening to some of the questions, I'd be remiss if we didn't use the opportunity to take some good out of a tragedy, which is absolutely is, which is, in this country, we have active killer situations at elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, colleges, places of business, places of worship throughout our country every day. Again, this is a local, state, and a federal country conversation. So when we talk about the idea of whether or not we continue to have our children go to school, or young adults at a college or a middle school or high school, I will tell you, again, drawing this conversation and making the correlation to the last few weeks of events, we've had local schools that have had 50% drops in attendance because of these online threats of gun violence and mass casualty concerns, which is, as a parent and a chief, I absolutely understand and I'm sympathetic, but I want media to ask yourself what you're asking of us in that question. And, you know, I like Chief Olson, refuse to live in a world of fear and let people who make bad decisions impact our daily lives. A small populations of individuals are not going to control the atmosphere and the environment of Tucson or this university. And so as a chief of police, I commend U of A leadership for not canceling classes. There's a distinction between a single act of violence where a perpetrator wants to flee an area and us developing intelligence that there's potential harm or risk to our students. That's the polarizing world that we're living in. But we have to push back against this idea that, again, because of a small population of our community that wants to act irresponsibly or make poor decisions, that it impacts the rest of our lives? That's the question in front of us. That's the question to continue to dig into as the days and the weeks evolve is, how did this gun come into play? Who purchased that gun? Was his family aware? There has to be more culpability and ownership of other people other than government or an academic institution if we want real change to come from a census act of violence. Those are the questions that we should be asking ourselves as we move forward. As our refugee population, many who fled other countries of violence only to come here, and this isn't the first time to lose a loved one, which is tragic. And so that's a great question, and it's something that the U of A will continue to work through, and also our City of Tucson resources as well.
I just want to add a little, I just left maybe 30 minutes ago, Orange Grove Middle School, which had one of our threats here in the last few weeks, and we talked to a number of parents there, probably 40, 50 in the audience. And one of the concerns is as I'm sitting there talking to middle school, here we are on a university campus and we have gun violence. And I know that we've looked at our school resource officers as a tool to get into these schools and mentor these kids, but there's an element here that we seem to miss, and that is our parents and their involvement, engagement. Because to be honest with you, when we hear of these threats and these types of violent situations, who's the first to really hear about it? It's usually the students, the kids, who then go to the parents. And we need those parents involved and engaged, having those difficult conversations that Chief Casmar points to. I'm going to give you a point here, just a reference. One weekend this summer, just one weekend, on a Friday night, we had 100 and some rounds fired into a crowd of 40, 50 kids up on our north side. Fortunately, only 3 or 4 were injured. Nobody was killed. The very next night, Saturday night, up on the north side in the foothills up on Swan and Sunrise, we had 20-some automobiles shot up randomly, shot up with dozens and dozens of rounds being fired. And then the very next night, we have an intersection takeover where, unfortunately, we have a 15-year-old young lady who was shot in the back of the head, who has another 16-year-old who was shot in the back and paralyzed for life, and another young one who was shot and killed. That's all in one weekend. And we learn from those 2 unfortunate deaths that it was their Nana and Tata who took them at 2 in the morning to this event of an intersection takeover. We're seeing our youth violence getting more and more of it. And it's actually getting younger. I'm talking to a middle school, and I'm thinking, I hope that in a couple of years I'm not sitting there talking to a grade school. So yes, we as a community need to do better. Parenting, I can't parent people. I just can't. None of us chiefs can. We have all the limited resources we have, and we throw it all together to keep our kids safe. That's priority 1 for us. But we can't do it without the community's help, and more importantly, we need to talk about, as parents, are we having those conversations? Thank you.
At this time, we're going to conclude the press conference for this morning. I'd like to remind the members of the press, both here and virtually, that follow-up questions or inquiries can be sent to UAPD, mediarequest.arizona.edu. It's also, the address is also located on the press releases that we have previously sent out to today. I'd also like to extend thanks to our U of A media audiovisual partners for helping us with today, members of our command staff, and of course, our investigative team. Thank you for coming, and we will get back to you as updates are available.